with FortiClient, and then about a year, Fortinet had acquired the company in Silo, the EDR company. And then at that point, they decided to just create an endpoint team. So came over as part of that team, and really my goal is just covering the endpoint products. So talking today really about FortiEDR and giving you an overview. Probably spend 15 minutes or so doing a presentation, then probably another 15 or 20 minutes doing a demo and just kind of showing you the interface, so you can kind of see what that looks like. And we do this too. This is your guys' time. So if you have any questions, feel free, when I take a break, just go ahead and ask a question, make it interactive. And hopefully you guys will find some benefit in this today. And really, as we start, the big reason with security challenges, you go look, it's lack of visibility is a big part of it, especially with remote workers at scale. COVID-19, we're starting to come out of that a little bit, but still lots of remote workers and lack of visibility, because if you can't see them, how can you expect to secure them or come up with their compliance status? Second big reason is, look at the threat landscape today. A lot of new advanced threats that are out there. Ransomware, we'll spend a lot of time talking about that today. And then, the third, also very important, security challenges, skill shortage, right? Alert fatigue, analyst burnout. It's hard to find people. So it's very important to have really strong partners as well. When we talk about ransomware anxiety, 16 days, the average number of days to remediate. That's over 2 full weeks. You even look at the pipeline, right, that happened a couple weeks ago. Downtime costs 5 to 10 times the actual ransomware amount. It can actually be a lot more than that. Just look at the amount of damage that was caused from the pipeline attack, just the impact on gas prices. The Colonial didn't have to pay that, but you and I did at the pump, right? Because gas prices really, really increased. And you see that throughout the industry, not just Colonial as the example. Some of the most common vectors for attacks, still phishing, right? Whether it's something coming in through email, right? They'll typically use in that phishing attempt to be able to get some credentials, right? Credential theft, taking over somebody's account. And really, the other piece would be just coming up with really kind of 3 ways to help you strengthen your posture. First, strengthening security posture, preventing attacks by doing, either across your endpoints and the different workloads. We'll talk about pre-infection. We'll talk about post-infection, maintaining business continuity, ensuring resiliency by minimizing the impact with early detection, as well as rapid response and recovery. And then really third, streamlining security operations, being able to address some of the challenges that we had talked about, having SOC maturity. We'll show you playbook, how that kind of acts and works as part of it. So, the first 3 or 4 slides, just talking about setting the stage as far as actually how EDR works, right? So pre-infection, when you think of EDR, it's cloud native. And we'll talk about what that actually means. Typically runs in the cloud, but you could run it on-prem. So we have some customers, energy, right? Energy or manufacturing customers that would take the FortiEDR VMs, run them inside their data center to help support that air-gapped environment. So part of EDR is helping reduce your attack surface. We call that pre-infection and blocking and prevention. So what that part of our Discover is being able to look and show you what vulnerabilities exist, right? I'll show you an example how we can learn all the applications in your environment. We can go tell you, hey, this version of Google Chrome has some really, really old vulnerabilities in it, right? Critical vulnerabilities. So EDR also has the ability to discover rogue devices as well as IoT devices. We'll talk about that and show you that as part of the demo. So that's really from our discover standpoint. We can also do prevention. So, every security technology out there is doing some kind of prevention. For EDR, it's not a traditional antivirus, right? Antiviruses are great. They've been around for 30 years. So, user downloads a file and an antivirus scans that file. Antiviruses are great for known threats, but what about the 0-day that just came out that nobody knows about, right? They can very easily get past an antivirus. So EDR, instead of being a traditional antivirus, we do machine learning, which is very, very small amount of resources, right? So that's also an advantage, and that it doesn't require a huge amount of CPU, kind of like an antivirus would. So machine learning, so if it's a known threat, we'll see it and block it just using our machine learning algorithm. We also use our threat intel from FortiGuard, right? And there's also integration with Sandbox. You can also use this in conjunction with a desktop firewall or possibly web filtering using like FortiClient. The other piece that I think is important too is EDR it's kernel-based. So a little bit different from a traditional antivirus, right? Antivirus runs as a user application, right, in user space. EDR, it's actually kernel-based, so a little bit deeper integration with your operating system. But like I said before, people don't buy EDR because of our ability to block something in prevention, right, and pre-infection. Everybody's been doing that for a long time. The reason that people buy EDR is, what if that brand new 0-day comes out and it gets past everybody's pre-infection, ours included, right? That threat actually gets onto the machine. When that process actually starts, EDR has the ability to see that it is breaking some of our rules, predefined rules. So ransomware tries to do file encryption, right? EDR, even though that threat is on a machine and it's active, right, that Windows process is running, EDR has the ability to do post-execution, right? It means that even though the threat started, we have the ability to automatically stop it, right? And the ability to automatically stop it in real time. And that's the big reason that people buy EDR, is the ability to see once that threat's on a machine, that it's active, it's breaking some of our rules, we have the ability to stop it in real time. And there's some other advantages too with the way we do post-infection and post-execution. The biggest is being able to automatically clean up your machine, right? This is the other big reason that people buy EDR. Ransomware gets on a machine, it tries to do file encryption. EDR will see it that it's trying to do file encryption. We will stop that action automatically without user interaction, and then we will automatically clean up your machine, right? And then we do this automatically, right? Literally, this is the reason that people buy EDR. And if you look at any third-party reviews, whether it's AV comparatives, whether it's MITRE ATT&CK, our post-execution is 100%, right? We won't have any misses, right? That's very, very important. And this is the reason that people buy EDR. The other big reason too is the ability to have what we call a playbook, right? Once a threat is detected on a machine and we have stopped it, right, and we've cleaned it up, that's kind of step one. So step two is, well, now that we have stopped that threat, what do we do as a next step is having the playbook automatically respond. So there's lots of examples of what a playbook can do for you. We can send out custom reports. We can help you block IP addresses. We can also do automatic remediation. We can automatically remove the file, automatically clean up your machine. Lots and lots of examples of playbooks, and I'll show you that also as part of the demo. Other example would be maybe opening a support case ticket for you, right? Maybe open a ServiceNow support case ticket. Also, ability to either suspend an IP address, isolate your machine. You could possibly log out. Lots of different examples I'll be able to show you as part of the demo. But this is the other kind of step 2, right? Step 1 is really cleaning up your machine, stopping it. And then step 2, the playbook, is kind of taking it a step further, right? Sending off a series of notifications, other actions, right? Maybe isolating your machine, sending addresses to the FortiGate, integrating with some of the other Fortinet infrastructure, right? Whether it's FortiSandbox, FortiNAC. So one of our first examples is, we call it MDR. So I haven't talked about MDR yet, but one of the other ways you can use EDR, right, is you can have the customer actually buy EDR and they can manage it themselves. But just being realistic, a lot of times customers just don't have the skill set, or they don't have the time, right, to manage EDR on their own. And if you think about it, security, it's not a 9-to-5 job anymore, right? It's very important to have somebody manage this environment 24/7. So one of our solutions is, we call it MDR, which is managed detection and response. So that in this case, the challenge is, they just don't have that security expertise, right? It's a public school. They wear a lot of different hats. Remote workers, distance learning, some of their other challenges. What happened, they had one of the staff fall victim to a phishing attack. Threats blocked on EDR, right, on our systems. The MDR team, right, that's part of FortiResponder, part of FortiGuard, able to track that threat, alert the admins, able to go clean up and remediate those machines, right? That's part of what FortiResponder will do. And then as far as the outcomes, right, escalation, coaching, helping, teaching everybody, making sure that they don't become other attacks, phishing attacks, other outcomes, preventing data loss, expanding the footprint. And really the profile was public school, right, serving K through 12, large school system, 25 different schools, almost 24,000 students. So really, really good example in education. Another example is, this is from manufacturing, right? So some of their challenges were, originally they had 3 different vendors between endpoint protection, and then they added EDR, and then they also used the MDR service, right? Managed detection and response. Similarly, cyber skill, just shortage, right? Just didn't have enough manpower or skills to be able to manage EDR 24/7. Their traditional service that they were using had a 3-day SLA, right? That's very, very long. The FortiResponder is a 24-hour SLA, and also includes escalations. So their requirements were vendor consolidation. They still wanted it to be managed EDR. And then some of their outcomes, simplified operation and reducing cost, single agent, right, for prevention, detection, and response. So that's one of the other pieces that I mentioned too, is using FortiEDR, you don't need other security tools, right? You don't need an antivirus anymore. You don't need any other tools, right? Just to protect your machine, you just need that single agent. And then, and really this was just for the Fortune 500 manufacturing customer. Some people ask too, what about like SolarWinds, right? How did we respond with SolarWinds? If you guys familiar with SolarWinds, it was a supply chain attack. So threat actors were able to get into SolarWinds. They added their malicious code into SolarWinds update, right? So, tens of thousands of customers go down, they upload, a new update for SolarWinds. Well, what could go wrong, right? A lot of people had SolarWinds whitelisted, right? Hey, we fully trust SolarWinds. EDR, it's not necessarily like that. So I'll show you that as part of the demo, how when SolarWinds was actually executed, we certainly stopped it. And then also our MDR team really helped take it a step further by analyzing some of these security incidents, helping identify other indicators of compromise. There are several good stories on FortiGuard of our response with SolarWinds. So I can send you some of those links if you're very interested. And then being able to see these hunting actions were performed, right, to help identify customers that were infected, having EDR, being able to automatically stop those threats, right? That was already built into the product, but being able to do proactive threat hunting, right? Threat hunting is all about finding threats before they get executed, right? Because it's possible that a payload gets dropped onto a machine and it doesn't get executed yet. It just got dropped as a payload. So that's really the goal of threat hunting, right? Is seeing some of these threats before they get executed. EDR would certainly stop them when they're executed, but being able to do threat hunting, right? That also is one of the responsibilities of the FortiResponder team, right? Is being able to help with that. So EDR very tightly integrated with Fortinet Security Fabric. So I'll show you there's integration with FortiGate, with FortiNAC, with FortiSandbox, additional integrations with FortiSIEM and FortiSOAR. And then the direction that we're headed is being able to integrate with other third parties because, we're not naive, right? I mean, there's companies that are going to have other solutions in their environment that aren't Fortinet, right? Whether it's, some other type of firewall, Palo Alto or Checkpoint, being able to integrate, possibly with Active Directory or Proofpoint, or maybe they're using a different SIEM like a Splunk. So this is the direction that we're also headed, right? Being able to come up with additional integrations with third party. And then the piece that we've announced a while back. So all along, we've been really talking about EDR, right? EDR sits on your machine when it's looking at the applications your user running. If it sees any rules that get broken, EDR sees it, stops it very, very quickly. And EDR, it's been around for several years. So kind of the evolution of EDR is XDR. So what XDR will do is it describes a security incident detection and response platform that automatically collects and correlates data from multiple security products, right? So in the previous slide, we talk about that integration, right? Really taking it a step further. Because traditional EDR, right, it's very focused on the endpoint, whereas the goal of XDR is to increase detection accuracy by correlating threat intel from multiple security solutions, right? So that's kind of how XDR takes it a step further from different security products, right? And then being able to take that data, help refine that data, and then use it as part of our security operations. So when we think of FortiXDR, and if you can picture, it's really an add-on. So, if a customer wants to buy EDR, they buy EDR. If they wanted to buy XDR, it's just an additional license. So it's still the same interface, right? Still the same collector that gets loaded on your machines. But the goal of XDR is broad attack surface coverage. So we talk about endpoints and IoT, access for your remote workers. It's cloud native, right? Investigation and response. And then really the big goal of EDR is improving your operational efficiency. So helping reduce the amount of alerts, incident classification. And the best example of this is, so here's just one example, but multiple controls log a malicious URL, right? User got an email, they potentially clicked on it. Step one is analytics engine flags that potential event, right? So potential phishing event, we have the ability to detonate that URL, right? Fetch that file, send that file for full analysis, and then based on that analysis, we can collect indicators of compromise, correlate those indicators of compromise against addresses and mail addresses, go back, search all of your endpoints for these indicators of compromise, find out that potentially some of these IOCs are on some machines that are out there, quarantine those machines, right? Once the machines are quarantined, we can also automatically remove these malicious files, right? Remnants and messages. And then at that point, update our signatures and reputations. Machines are cleaned up, remove the quarantine, and then we would report and close that incident, right? So that kind of walks you through, right? This is just one of the examples of how XDR would work. You know, that's a really, really good example. There's a couple more too, but this is probably one that's very, very popular. So now we go through and we talk about FortiGuard and responder services. So FortiResponders, that's our managed EDR. And it's also, we have the ability to do incident response. So going through MDR team will help you. So you go through, you become a customer, help you prepare your environment, detection and response. They do the containment, remediation. There's really two flavors. There's just a managed service, right? MDR, they would manage the environment for you. If your customer wants to just buy EDR and manage it themselves, they can still buy a big block of forensics hours. So some people say, well, you know what? I want to manage it on my own, but I still would like to have an expert available, right? So you could buy a big block of hours, or unfortunately, but we have some customers that reach out and say, hey, you know what? We just got hit with ransomware. I need an IR service, right? I need somebody that can help me remediate ransomware, you know, very, very quickly. Same FortiResponder team is also available for IR.
Chris, we do have a question in the chat.
Sure.
The question was, in the example one, how long does that process take?
So the process of remediation. So really,
I'm not quite sure. Betty, if you want to come off mute too and clarify, otherwise Chris can kind of give an overview as well.
I think in the example one, we're looking at how long does it take you quarantine devices on the network? How long does it take to run those things through the quarantine and get them back on the network?
Yeah, that's a good question. So if you go back a couple slides, really depends. You know, there's a lot of moving parts and pieces. The ability to quarantine, that's included really as part of our playbook. So if we see any rules that get broken, EDR can decide to automatically quarantine a machine. As far as the removing, that's also really included as part of the playbook. The removing a quarantine, that's not automated. So up to you guys to decide when you wanted to remove a machine from quarantine. But this piece, the removing and cleaning up, that's also included as part of the playbook. So we'd be able to see that the machine was indeed quarantined. The playbook had, let's say, a malicious file tried to change some registry settings, right? And EDR stopped it. The EDR would then, and playbook would make sure that that gets cleaned up automatically. Same thing with removing the file. So kind of up to you guys. You could remove it automatically as part of the playbook, or you guys could say, hey, you know what? I don't necessarily want to automatically remove a file, right? Because what if it's a false positive, right? You deleted it, you know, then you have to turn around and restore it. So there's a couple ways, but this whole process should be very, very quick, right? This isn't, you know, in the old days, this would take hours, right? Hours and hours. You know, now we're down to minutes and less in some cases. And then I'll show you as part of the playbook too. Once we jump into a demo, we can expand on that a little bit further. Hope that does that answer the question for them, I hope.
They said thank you. That's perfect.
Okay, awesome. And then the other piece too is I want to make sure we stay on track. So I'm just now finishing. So the FortiResponder, right? Continuous 24/7 monitoring of your environment. So if a threat comes in, they would see it, make sure that that threat is handled. These are the FortiResponder team. You know, as I go and I manage POCs, if I get stuck and I have a question, the FortiResponder, they're the people that I ask, right? They are real threat hunters by trade, 24/7. So being able to go manage this environment on your behalf, or the other possibility would be per incident, right? Kind of like I had mentioned where, you know what, hey, customer got hit with ransomware. They want them for incident response, right? There's IR services are also available. And then part of that, they would go through and pull relevant logs from all of your environment, right? Not just from Fortinet, but whatever firewall you're using, anything from your IPS, your SIMs. They would analyze memory dumps and log files. They would look at the malicious payloads, right? So they are available for incident response as well.
Chris, we actually have another question. Stephen
Sure.
Boss looks like he has his hand up. You can come off mute, Stephen, and ask your question.
Yeah, I was just going to ask the FortiResponder, will you guys actually send people out hands-on keys, like fly someone out, you know, in an instance of ransomware? Because, you know, typically with the ransomware, a lot of times what you see with the ransomware is a complete and total, say, breach, right? Where,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the client has to take everything off the network, right?
Yeah.
So I'm assuming, are you guys going to that level with that service, or is that more just a remote instant response service?
It's typically remote. I mean, not to say that we couldn't send somebody out, but typically we would start with remote. And then if it's emergency, it may be possible to send somebody physically on site. But a lot of times the initial piece, you know, they would be trying to have somebody with a, you know, clean up, spin up a brand new laptop, and then start pulling off log files. But yeah, the initial piece is typically done remote, but you know, it's anything is up for negotiation, right?
Okay.
And then we're almost finished with just the Prezo piece. So some of the takeaways from EDR, you know, broad security coverage, right? Windows, Linux, Mac. We do support older OSs, whether it's all the way back to XP, Service Pack 2, you know, Server 2003 R2. Ability to do extended detection, right? Being able to detect these incidents before they get executed. The big piece and reason too is people use EDR, you know, not just from a discovery and machine learning AV, pre and post infection, right? That's really the big reason that people buy EDR is, you know, there's going to be some brand new 0-day that comes out, world's never seen before. It gets past everybody's machine learning, right? Or your antivirus, ours included. But when that threat actually gets onto the machine, EDR sees it and stops it post-infection, right? That's really the big value of EDR. And then being able to automatically clean up that machine, right? That's the big reason that people buy EDR. We can also do, and I'll show you part of the demo, you know, blocking vulnerabilities. So we have the ability to stop certain applications from running, right? If they have some critical vulnerabilities in it. And then really the third piece, right, is helping your SOC become more efficient, automated, real-time, the MDR service, right, managing this on your behalf, and then be able to do threat hunting, extending your fabric, right? I'll talk about some of the XDR functionality as well. So that's typically everything from a presentation standpoint. You know, as we go over, and I'll spend maybe 15 minutes 10-15 minutes just kind of showing you the environment of what EDR. Like I mentioned before, it's cloud-based, right? So EDR runs in the cloud. It is possible to take these VMs and run them inside your data center. It's typically customers that are either manufacturing, right? They might have a real OT environment, right? Those machines don't access the internet. Or it could also be like energy companies, right? That have an air-gapped environment, right? Some of their machines, they don't want to access the internet. So they would take these VMs, run them inside your data center. But it's a small percentage, probably 95% of customers run EDR in the cloud. We'll go through and build the collector. So the collector, that's just the agent that we install on your endpoints, right? We call it a collector. Windows, Mac, Linux, put in your email address, and then we'll send you a link that has a 32-bit and 64-bit installers. So you'll go push that out on your machines. For Windows, it's an MSI. So you push out that using my group policy or SCCM. User sees a green dot on their machine, right? EDR, it's now running. So very, very easy and quick to install. And then as far as really protecting your machine, we have some of these built-in policies. So one of them is specific for USB. So if you have wanted to block or control certain USB types, you can do that with EDR. So I have a bank that uses this, and they associate this with their servers, right? They don't want anybody to plug in a USB mass storage device into their server environment. If they do, it's automatically blocked. And you could go create an exception. So if you have a certain USB serial number that you wanted to use, right, you can use that specific USB drive. But maybe blocking is too extreme. So some people will set it, enable this for just to do logging. So if somebody plugs in a drive, right, you'd be able to see it and log that data. And then really outside of USB, there's really 3 policies that we use to protect your machine. So the first one, execution prevention, that's just our machine learning algorithm. So I mentioned that before. EDR, it's not a traditional antivirus, right? So when you go download a file with EDR, we're not going to scan that file looking for known signatures, right? We just do machine learning. If it's a known threat, we'll see it and block it, right? Just using machine learning. But like I mentioned before, what if there's a brand new 0-day that comes out and it gets past everybody's antivirus and our machine learning, right? That's what 0 days do. When that threat actually gets onto your machine, EDR has the ability to see, is it breaking any of these predefined rules? So typical malicious file, it's going to do process hollowing. That's replacing good code with bad code. Is it going to do kernel injection? Taking its code, injecting it into some commonly used DLLs. If any of these rules get broken, EDR sees it and blocks it very, very quickly within 20 to 30 milliseconds, right? So very, very quick. If any rule gets broken, EDR sees it and stops it. And then really the goal of this exfiltration policy is really monitoring communication. So as your users run applications, those applications are communicating, that traffic goes through the kernel, EDR, it's monitoring communication. And then really there's a third policy specific for ransomware. So ransomware, if it gets onto one of your machines, normally the first thing it'll try to do is it needs to have admin rights. So if it can escalate privileges, right, then it has admin rights. So if there's any process that's trying to escalate privileges, EDR, it's going to see it and block it very, very quickly, right, without any user interaction. Second thing that ransomware does once it has admin rights and control of your machine is it starts encrypting files, right? And then it's too late at that point, that machine's compromised. So if there's any process that's trying to do encrypt files, EDR, it's going to automatically stop it. And then really the goal of this ransomware policy is monitoring the file system, right? So exfiltration's monitoring communication. The ransomware, it's monitoring the actual file system. So if there's any process that's trying to tamper with the file system, right, disk encryption, file encryption, accessing credentials, anything related to the file system, ransomware policy is going to stop it. And then the other piece is, and these policies work even if your user is not connected to the cloud, right? So I think that's also a value add. An example of that is, what if your user is, somebody sent your user a malicious Word doc, right? And he's on an airplane. He's obviously not connected to the cloud. These policies still work even if your user is not connected to the cloud. So user double clicks on that malicious Word doc and it tries to launch PowerShell. PowerShell tries to create a connection to China. EDR stops PowerShell from being launched from Word, right? That's kind of the first step. And it does this without being connected to the cloud, right? So these policies are kind of step one, right? And really these policies don't do anything else. They're just looking to see if a rule gets broken. And then the way we would do our deployment is we would deploy EDR onto your machines, and then we would start out in simulation mode. So these policies wouldn't be in prevention. We would start out in simulation mode. And then during the first couple weeks, right, we were looking, professional services are part of every deployment. So we would look and build these exceptions for your applications during the first couple weeks. And then after being in simulation mode for a week or 2 weeks, then we switch these into prevention mode, right? We're actually protecting your machines at that point. And then really these policies are kind of step one, right? Just looking to see if a rule gets broken. If it does, we see it, stop it very, very quickly. And then step two is we have what's called the playbook. So what the playbook will do for you is, you remember back in the pre-zo, we talk about orchestration and automation. The playbook would then say, hey, you know what, we have an incident, right? A malicious file, a suspicious file. EDR would then take that, an example of the malicious Word doc, right? EDR sees it, we stop it from, launching PowerShell, right? And then it's classified as a malicious event. The playbook then takes it a step further, right? So step two is go ahead and automatically shut down that process, right? Don't let it continue to sit out there and use memory. Don't let it try anything else that's malicious, right? We automatically shut it down. We also go back and clean persistent data, right? So if that file tried to change any registry settings, EDR would see it and undo it, right? Clean up that machine. And the example too is, a lot of customers have FortiGates. So EDR in that example that I just gave you, the malicious Word doc that tried to launch PowerShell tried to create a connection to China. EDR would then send that address that's destined for China. We would send it to the FortiGate, and I'll show you that here in just a second, what that would look like. And then these are yours to turn on and off. There's no right rule. Whatever works for you guys. Same thing with isolating, right? So in addition, or maybe you want to automatically delete that file, right? You could automatically delete it when we detect a malicious file. So the playbook is step two, right? Once we have an incident that broke some of our rules, the playbook then helps stop and clean up your machine. And then if you wanted to isolate it, right, EDR can isolate your machine using, if you're a FortiNAC customer, if you just want to isolate it using EDR, right, you can isolate it with EDR. You could also move it to a high security group, right? That could also be part of it. And then the final piece is sending off a whole series of notifications, right? You get email notification. If you guys have some type of SIM or syslog, right, we would also send off a syslog notification, even open a ServiceNow support case ticket for you. So playbook is kind of step two, right, in helping get your machine cleaned up. And then this is really the big reason that people buy EDR, right, is seeing that any of these rules get broken, security policy, we stop it, right, from launching PowerShell or encrypting your, files, and then the playbook cleans up the machine, right? That's the big value add of EDR. And then just to kind of show you an example of what some of these events would look like. One of the examples would be, I have a process that was running, and when I go take a look at that machine, I think it might be this one. Where are we at here? So in this example, user goes and runs a file, and EDR says, obviously the big red block is telling us that we blocked it. Anytime our rules get broken, right? Remember, under security policies, we had exfiltration and ransomware. We had about 40 or 50 different rules. EDR shows you what rules were broken. We also give you a paragraph explanation. And then within each of these, we show you the MITRE attack. So this is a clickable link. If I click this link, it takes us to the MITRE attack site, where we can actually learn about software packing. You can learn a little bit more detail about the rule that was broken. And then this connection, it's not a real SVC host process. EDR sees it's a fake program. Big red block is telling us that we blocked it from creating a connection out to the network. And then anytime you see a connection that was trying to be made out to the network, there's a geolocation button. So where does this threat exist, right? Is it Russia, China? In this case, it's actually an address in Ireland. So threat actor probably able to get into this machine, take it over, and use it as part of its exfiltration. So EDR sees it and stops it. And then the other piece is EDR would then take this address, right, 86104, and we would send it to your FortiGate. So if I log into my FortiGate, EDR takes this address, and part of the integration is we would send it to your FortiGate. And then the FortiGate puts it into an address group. And the advantage is these could be anybody in your LAN subnets. These could be machines with EDR, without EDR. They could be Chromebooks, routers, switches, any device in your network trying to go out your WAN port. If you're trying to go to any of these addresses, right, these are all events that were classified as malicious within EDR, right? So here's our 86104 address. So as soon as this address and event was triggered in EDR, right, EDR automatically sent this address to your FortiGate, and then FortiGate puts it into this rule, right, into this address group. And then the action is denied. So anybody in your environment, right, any of your machines, even machines without EDR or IoT, any device, if you're trying to go to any of these addresses, right, the action's going to be automatically denied. And the advantage too is this happens very, very quickly, right, within seconds, because if you think about it, this address, it's possible this address will find its way to FortiGuard as a command and control server. That process takes quite a bit of time, whereas this integration with FortiGate happens pretty quickly, right? Just takes seconds for us to take this address, put it into this address group. So that's one of the big advantages of integration with FortiGate. And then the other piece would be, we talk about the playbook, right? And we had that box checked that said, terminate process, right? So this fake process that's running on this machine, if we were to look on it, that process ID 6040 was actually running. The playbook then in EDR automatically terminated that process, right? We shut it down. Don't let it continue to sit out there and use memory. So that's also one of the big advantages of the playbook, right? Is helping clean up your machine. And then there's kind of two other things real quick before we finish that I wanted to highlight that EDR can also help you with. So one of the big
one
advantages.
more question that came in.
Sure.
Oh, sorry, Chris. Steven
no, go ahead.
Boss, he actually answered or asked the 3 questions in the chat. Steven, did you want to come off mute and kind of read those off, or I can read it off too? It's
I can ask. Yeah. So my first question was, I think these are pretty quick questions. So the first is, when deploying the EDR sensor, does it require a reboot of the machine?
The answer to that is no. You can force a reboot, but it's technically not required.
So you get the full visibility and everything full without a reboot. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And then
Yep.
the second is, how do updates work? Is it self-updating? Is it, do you have to deploy an update to the sensor? How does that work?
Yep, that's a good question. So kind of up to you guys. So it is possible, if you want, to do automatic updates.
Mm-hmm.
So there is an option within here to be able to do updates automatically. So if you wanted to make sure, actually don't turn that on for everybody, but you could have updates happen automatically. Latest revision, right? So we wouldn't upgrade you if there's a major version that comes out, but if there's a new collector revision, you can automatically do it, or just within the console, right? So I could go to my machine and either a collector group, right? These would be, hey, IT staff, I want to go ahead and upgrade IT staff to the latest 501 revision 230, right? So you could either select based on collector group, or, hey, you know what, I just want to go ahead and update everybody.
Okay. And then I think, the last question is, we do a lot of forensics work for our clients. Can we use FortiEDR? So if we're in an IR, can we use FortiEDR to download files for forensic analysis? And can we also use it to like upload or push a file or a script to execute scripts from FortiEDR?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you can absolutely download files from EDR. I normally don't show it as part of the demo, but yeah, absolutely. So, you never know if the crowd that you have is more technical or in nature or not, but inside the forensics module. So if I go and say this, Kerber.exe, I believe this is a malicious file, I wanted to retrieve it, I can absolutely just retrieve that from disk. It would be password protected, right, in case it really is malicious, but you would be able to retrieve that from the machine, absolutely.
Excellent. And what about uploading or executing a script against an endpoint or a group of endpoints? Yeah,
so there is a possibility to open a remote shell. Support today has to enable that for you. So if you wanted to push a remote shell script, support would be able to help you enable that. Can't be enabled directly from EDR today, but they're looking at adding that a little bit later in the summer, right? The ability for you guys to automatically do it, but today it would be support enabled.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's all my questions. The only other thing I'd like to ask at some point, but I know you're probably running low on time, is what differentiates, and I think I started to see it, but what differentiates FortiEDR from your competitors' products, like say, CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, the common ones that are out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's really a couple things. So even like CrowdStrike, right? There's a 800-pound gorilla, and they seem to be everywhere. Go look at some of the third-party reviews. And really what happens is they focus a lot on pre-infection, right? Trying to prevent threats from getting onto a machine, right? EDR, a little bit different, right? I mean, we put in a good effort in prevention, but you know what? At the end of the day, there's always going to be some 0 day that gets onto your machine, right? It's not if, it's when. EDR, the big value of EDR is post-infection protection. That is the big value prop. That's why if you look at any third-party reviews, even from the MITRE attack, right? S1 CrowdStrike, they had misses. A miss means that that threat actually not just got onto the machine, but it was able to take it over, right? EDR will always have 0 misses, right? Just because of our architecture. We might not catch everything in prevention, right? But that's fine, right? Because you know what? Eventually, it's more important to have very strong post-infection protection, right? That's really the big goal, is preventing threats from taking over your machine. We still feel we have the absolute best protection that's out there. CrowdStrike, super good forensics, right? I can't speak enough about S1, but the piece that we've added within the last quarter is very, very strong threat hunting. So this has really helped us level the playing field more to CrowdStrike and S1 from a forensic standpoint. So you can see how small the scroll bar is here. So you can go do threat hunting pretty much based on anything in your environment. But also you don't have to be a query wizard in, typing in command lines. You can go through anywhere you see a green plus sign, you can add that and we'll filter on it, right? So we'll go filter out everything related to my EMS server. You can continue to do threat hunting and look for certain behaviors, right? These columns down at the bottom, right? You can also add here as well. So I could go through and look for specific behaviors, show me everything in my environment that's doing, trying to escalate privileges or accessing LSAS, right? You could filter that out. And then once you have created your own indicators of compromise, you can save these queries. Another example would be searching for a certain CVE, looking for the presence of a web shell, right? And threat hunting is all about finding threats before they get executed, right? Whereas EDR, if a threat gets onto a machine, we stop it. But being able to do threat hunting, right, using this as a tool, good example would be web shell, looking for somebody that's trying to run PsExec, anybody trying to use LSAS and access credentials, escalating privileges. You can go through and run and create these queries and schedule them to run, right? Every hour, every 15 minutes, right? You could go create these queries, right? So I think the threat hunting is also becoming a lot more popular.
Are those queries, do you have like templates built out for those queries? So like those of us who may not know or have built out queries or know what to look for, are those in the system?
They're not built in automatically, but you reach out to myself or some of the other SEs, they're starting to build. We can enable either, more community related, but, we do have as a group some really good examples of queries that we could pass along.
Cool.
And then I know we've got just maybe a couple more minutes, but the last piece that I think is important is the ability, and this is kind of fits in with the pre-infection, right? And our ability to discover all the applications in your environment. So Google Chrome, for example, I can tell you not just Google Chrome, every version of Google Chrome, and then I can tell you this version of Google Chrome has hundreds of CVEs in them, right? These are also clickable links. So if I click this link, it takes me to the MITRE attack site. I can read about what this vulnerability is, right? And then you guys can decide, you know what, I really don't feel comfortable allowing my users to run, these old versions of Google Chrome, right? There's hundreds of ways that threat actors can try to get in your environment. So using EDR, I can just decide to block these specific versions of Google Chrome, right? So if somebody's trying to run these two versions, you get a pop-up telling you the application's being denied, right? And we say that is reducing your attack surface, right? I have now taken away 368 ways that threat actors can try to get into your environment. So by blocking these two versions allows you to go get these versions patched, right? or also allows you to be able to find out the users running these versions and get them updated, right, to something that's a little bit newer. So that's one of the ways you could use EDR, just searching for, hey, you know what, just show me all the apps in my environment that have critical vulnerabilities in them, right? We show you that full list. Or you could just go through and search, right? Hey, here's, you know, pretty broad capabilities to go, you know what, I just want to know all of the applications that have vulnerabilities in my environment. You can go filter that out. If you wanted to know specific machine vulnerabilities that were on it, right, you could put in that machine name. If there's some brand new CVE that comes out, right, Outlook, you know, a month or two ago, they listed some you know, some vulnerabilities. If you wanted to know if they exist, right, put in that CVE ID and we'll search for it, right? So I think this is also one of the very important ways that you can use EDR, right, in helping make sure that your environment stays safe. And then kind of along the same lines of discovery is being able to show you if you have any devices that are IoT in your environment. These are machines that can't have EDR on them, right? It's typically a hardened OS. And then you can go through and search, and then you can see and search for these in your data center, right? You can say, how come I have a, you know what, Raspberry Pi that's on my server subnet? You know what, that kind of sticks out. I don't know that I should have that running in my data center server environment, right? Helping you just track down. And then if you see other devices that you recognize, right, you can change the category of it, right? And then you could move it to these other categories. Can't quite do it today, but kind of the future that we're headed is to be able to do remote vulnerability scanning against these machines, right? And then show you, hey, you know what, this machine has some critical vulnerabilities in it, you know, therefore we might want to restrict it to internet access, right? It shouldn't have the ability to talk to your Active Directory, right? So not quite there yet, but that's kind of the direction that we're headed. And then along the same lines of the discovery, we can show you if you have any machines that are unmanaged. These are machines that can have EDR on them, right? But they don't, right? They show up as unmanaged. And then you would say, well, how come this is a Windows server, you know, or Windows machine, and it's in my server subnet, right? But it doesn't have EDR on it, right? That's also a big red flag. So I've had lots of customers run this and they find out and they're like, hey, you know what? We had a couple Windows machines in a lab environment, and you know what? They were supposed to be powered off, but they weren't. You know, they're sitting in your environment, but they, you know, they don't have EDR on them. So you can kind of use that as a tool, right, to show you if there's any machines that don't have EDR on them. So I know we went about a full hour, but lots of good data that we can share for you guys. I hope this was pretty helpful. I'll open it up at this point for what kind of questions do we have? Is there anything that we haven't covered? Any final questions?
I think we should be good for now, but if people have questions after the fact too, you can reach out to me or Chris, and we're more than happy to help you as well. And I just want to let you know too, I'm heading to ship out the shipments right after this too. You guys should get kind of some fun drinks and snacks that you can enjoy now that it's getting nicer out. Thank you so much, Chris, for your time. We really appreciate it. That was amazing. Thank you.
Awesome. I think I appreciate it very much, everybody. Lots of good questions, and we will talk to you guys soon. Thank you, guys. Everybody have a good day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
My voice is still